Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, a pretty interesting primary taking place in Indiana last night that is prompting the discussion over what does the future of the GOP look like, plus an insane California Democrat primary debate last night on CNN. We'll get into all the details coming up. And a good Wednesday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you on demand 24/7 in your favorite podcast app. It's real simple. Just search for the Nick Craig Show, tap the subscribe or follow button if you are so inclined to do so. Also would love a review on your favorite podcast app. Leave it a 5-star review if you would be so kind to do so. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. As our program this morning is brought to you by the Law Group. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. An interesting night in the state of Indiana. We'll get into some details on the Republican primary that took place in Indiana last night, as many of the politicians in the Indiana legislature that previously rejected a redistricting effort were primaried, and we'll get to the details as to how those races played out. But before that, I want to open the show with talking about the California gubernatorial debate that happened last night on CNN. I didn't know that this was happening, as I was just had all the cable news networks on in the background last night. And all of a sudden, I see this debate going on. I see this back and forth. And so I turned up the volume and was absolutely sucked in by the event. It was so fascinating to watch, as you had a list of 7 Democrats and 5 Republicans taking place in the debate. The Democrats include the former, under the Joe Biden administration, Health and Human Service Secretary Beccaria was in there, San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan, former Orange County Representative Katie Porter. We know about her, Congressman Porter, and how she treats her staffers and people that she works with. Billionaire hedge fund founder Tom Steyer and former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Valero are the Democrat candidates in the race. On the Republican side, you had Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco and former Fox News host Steve Hilton. So it was 5 Democrats, 2 Republicans making up the 7-member debate that took place on CNN last night. And I don't know that I would necessarily say I was surprised by this, but I will say it was a little bit shocking to hear how Democrats in the state of California truly are incapable of accepting responsibility for anything that they have done. And so as this debate went on, it lasted 2 hours, a little over 2 hours on CNN last night. All of the questions, and of course, it being a CNN debate, they of course have to make it about President Donald Trump. A lot of the questions surrounded Trump, which, I'm going to be honest, I know that the Democrats believe that that is their winning message leading into 2026. And to their credit, that might be true. They might have some success constantly talking about President Donald Trump. But I would imagine that the voters in California are frustrated with a litany of issues, including sky-high prices, a mass exodus from their state, businesses and corporations packing up shop, telling their employees, hey, yeah, we'll relocate you to Texas or Idaho or somewhere else, but we're not going to allow you to work remote, so your option is either come pack up and move to wherever we're moving or find another place to work. You've got out of control crime, out of control homelessness, an immigration fiasco, all of these major issues taking place in the state of California, and almost every single question surrounded Donald Trump. And it just seemed very off from what reality is for many people in the state of California, of which I've talked to. I've got friends that live out there, and they are not in favor, and they are not a fan of what has gone on in that state over the last couple of decades. And we are now seeing in real time the results of decades of atrocious leadership within the state of California. we're seeing the result in real time. And, these things take time, right? The second that Democrats get elected, they usher in their horrific and terrible agenda, but it in many cases takes some pretty significant time before the real implications of that stuff start to be felt, and where people eventually hit what you would describe as kind of a breaking point, where they say, you know what, I've had enough, it's time to get out. And for many folks, that breaking point was in and around COVID-19, as California had some of the most out of control, ridiculous regulations anywhere in the United States. Of course, as Governor Gavin Newsom ate at the French Laundry up in the Napa Valley, telling all of his citizens, you got to stay inside or you're going to drop dead of COVID-19. Meanwhile, he's enjoying his five-star $200 a plate dinner up in the wine country up in Northern California. Many folks have decided that they are going to make the move, and that's exactly what they have done. So you would assume, and maybe that makes me the idiot here, but you would assume that the candidates running for governor in California, and obviously you know where the Republicans stand on these issues, but the 5 Democrats would take some time to self-reflect on what has gotten California into the mess that it is in and say, I have a plan, I have a solution to fix this. But they didn't. They were talking about how all of them were going to out-progressive each other, how they were going to bring forward single-payer health care for the state of California, which is estimated to cost somewhere in the ballpark of like $500 billion or something like that. They just refused to challenge any of the norms, any of the status quos in the state of California. And it was truly remarkable to watch this attempt. And I get it was for the 5 Democrats. They're trying to out-Democrat the other person and win the primary. I understand how a primary works. I understand how a primary debate works. But it was truly amazing to watch those 5 Democrats and then Steve Hilton and Sheriff Chad Bianco standing up on stage, just in the case of the Democrats, being unwilling to discuss any of these important issues. When asked about high prices for Californians, which I think is a valid and fair concern, I think most people, even if they don't have a large geopolitical knowledge or background, would say that states like New York and California have some of the highest costs anywhere in the nation. Why would they think that? Well, because it's true. And the data and the numbers and the evidence would back that up. So when asked about that question, Democrat after Democrat after Democrat blamed high prices in California on Donald Trump. Now, you can argue that gas prices are higher right now, and that is a direct result of the war in Iran. And you can claim that, yes, that is the fault of Donald Trump. That is fine. That is a fair and, I would argue, accurate thing to say. Gas prices are higher because of the conflict in Iran. No question about that whatsoever. But that's not what California residents have been complaining about for the last 10 or 15 years. The reason that California year over year over year has seen more people moving out of the state than moving into the state is not because of the conflict that started with Iran 2 months ago, right? This is a relatively new thing. Prior to March, gas prices were relatively low across the United States. People were still trying to do everything in their power to get out of California. But when pressed on the issue of how are you going to make California more affordable, the only answer that Democrats had was Donald Trump. It's Trump's fault. Public safety, crime. We see the lawlessness, the videos that make their way on social media of teenagers and other individuals ransacking stores, these flash mobs where they run into department stores and steal everything that they possibly can. A lot of that going on in California and New York. Public safety, that's Donald Trump's fault. Immigration, Donald Trump's fault. The cost of living, Donald Trump's fault. Everything that was asked of them, minus, single payer healthcare, which they did in fact say, well, the reason we have to look at single payer healthcare is because Donald Trump has destroyed the healthcare system. Surprise, surprise. It was truly amazing. I don't have a bunch of clips from it. CNN likes to copyright claim their content, so I don't want to get dinged on the YouTube or Rumble or X version or Facebook version of the show. So I don't have any clips for you, but if you have some time over the next couple of days, I would encourage you to seek out the CNN California gubernatorial debate that happened on Tuesday night, the 5th, and just put it on in the background, take a listen to it, and I think you will be shocked when you hear the just out of control nature of the modern Democrat Party. And I think this goes into this larger discussion that we've had many times here on this program of the Democrat Party operating as essentially a rudderless ship. This discussion over the Democrats having no direction moving forward is a real one. And it's one that even in midterm elections coming up later this year that do favor the Democrats due to the fact of how midterm elections work, the party in charge typically gets shellacked in those elections. It is still interesting to me that all of this time after November of 2024, that there is still not one concise leader within the Democrat Party. That to me is still relatively surprising and relatively shocking. So again, I'd encourage you, if you've got some time and you can stomach through a couple of hours of nonsense, go find some clips, find a copy of this CNN gubernatorial debate that happened last night. I put on Twitter that my jaw was on the floor, and it really was, watching how out of touch these Democrats are, not only with, I would argue, their voters in the state of California, but with the vast majority of the United States as a whole, and just seemingly not understanding at all how people are feeling, how their residents are feeling, or the serious discussions that are taking place all over the state of California as people seek safe haven in places like Texas, hell, even moving out to the East Coast, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, as mass immigration we're seeing in these states that are led by Republicans, that have Republican control, New York, or from states like New York and California. We're seeing that growth. We're seeing that emphasis play out right now, and it is kind of interesting to watch. Great comment coming in on our Rumble live chat. Democrats have no other platform than TDS, abortion, and identity issues. Oh, and ICE, which of course ICE was a major discussion as well, as we heard from Democrat after Democrat last night during the debate, that they're going to stand up to the Trump administration over immigration enforcement. And as Steve Hilton jumped in and said, you know, guys, it sounds great, but you don't have the authority to do that as the governor of California. Immigration law is set by the administration. Immigration law is set by the White House and enacted by the federal government. So you can run around the state of California and pretend to be la resistance for the president of the United States, but immigration law is not set at the state level. It's set at the federal level. And so for all of the these Democrats in California talking this big game about how they're going to fight back against Donald Trump, and Katie Porter with her F Donald Trump this and F Donald Trump that comments, it doesn't matter because she has no control. If she is successful, which hopefully she won't because she's an awful, terrible person, but if she is successful in becoming the governor of California, she will have literally zero control over what the administration does as it relates to immigration. Literally zero. But that, of course, doesn't stop her from her catchy sound bites and her fundraising emails that have the headline, literally, F Donald Trump, not censored. That's what she is fundraising on in the state of California. So no surprise there, a total shit show for Democrats on the CNN debate last night. I would encourage you to go seek that out. And if you're so inclined, I'd love to hear your feedback. You can shoot me an email, send me a tweet, or post on X, Facebook, anywhere that you follow the Nick Craig Show. I'm curious what you think after you watch this. Turning our attention to a long-term discussion that is going to take place over the next couple of years. What is the future of the GOP? Now, it's important to note, and I want to preface this entire discussion that we're going to have here today on Donald Trump is going to be in the Oval Office for the next 2.5 years. And so anybody that says they know emphatically right now what the future of the Republican Party looks like after Donald Trump is just frankly lying to you, because they have no idea. I have no idea. I've got some thoughts, and there's some different ideas and opinions that can be thrown around, but truly nobody knows, right? When Donald Trump is termed out coming up in 2028, does he fall into normal society and just enjoy the remaining years of his life with his children and grandchildren? Does he stay politically involved? Does he, does he remain this kind of firebrand within the Republican Party? That remains unseen. But we saw something very interesting last night in Indiana that, to me, kind of sets the stage for what the Republican Party, what the GOP looks like moving forward. On yesterday's program, which if you missed it, would encourage you to head on over to your favorite podcast app or visit the website nickcraig.com and check out yesterday's show. We talked about redistricting in the state of Florida as they have redrawn their maps, their legislature and Governor Ron DeSantis signing new maps into law. Covered a little bit about what went on in Virginia over the last couple of weeks as our ongoing series on redistricting continues here on the program. And so Indiana was one of the states very early on in the 2025 redistricting cycle that jumped into the fray. And the state of Indiana and the Indiana legislature has a very strong Republican majority. And so they had the ability, they had the opportunity to redraw their congressional maps to box out Democrats in the entire state. There are currently 2 Democrat districts in the state of Indiana. One in and around Indianapolis, no surprise there. Indy is a very large city, not only in Indiana, but across the nation, is one of the larger cities in the country, and up in the northwest corner of the state up near Gary, Indiana. Those are the 1st and 7th congressional districts in the state of Indiana. And so lawmakers in the General Assembly in the House over in Indiana proposed new maps that would carve up those districts and give Republicans all 9 congressional seats in the state of Indiana. And it passed the Indiana House overwhelmingly, with the final vote being 57-41. Now, that 57 included 12 Republicans that voted against it. But even with those 12 Republicans in the House voting against it back on December the 5th of 2025, it still passed overwhelmingly, 57-41. We then go over to the Indiana Senate. Similar to our North Carolina legislature, you've got the upper and lower chamber. Wherever a bill or a piece of legislation originates, it has to go to the other one to get final approval before it goes, of course, to the governor's desk for a signature. And Indiana has a Republican governor, so presumably you would not have had any major problems there. This is where the issue took place. Republicans hold 40 seats in the Indiana Senate. 40 seats compared to just 10 seats held by Democrats. They have a 30-vote advantage in the General Assembly in the Indiana Senate. That is a strong super majority. But for Republicans back on December the 11th of 2025, they were unwilling to move forward with this redistricting. 21 Republicans in the Indiana Senate voted against those maps, and the final vote failed 31-19. 31 voting against the maps, 19 voting in favor. That is a very clear majority there, failing 31-19. And that prompted a lot of questions in the immediate aftermath of what is going on in states and legislatures, like in a state like Indiana, where you have clear and concise Republican control, right? We see what Democrats are doing in states like California, in states like Virginia, where they have clear control. Virginia puts this bogus constitutional amendment on the ballot telling their voters, you need to vote in favor of this so that we can redraw maps to make them fair. We got to make everything as fair as possible for the voters in the state of Virginia. So please pass this constitutional amendment. And to the success of Democrats just to our north in Virginia, they were successful in doing so. Voters voted, I think it was 51-48, something like that. The final tally, 52, something like that, for that constitutional amendment. And obviously, not barring any major continuation of court battles, those maps will be redrawn. And so the question was, in a state like Indiana, what has gone on here? The House, 57-41 vote, the Senate, 19-31, a losing vote there to redraw these maps. This prompted President Donald Trump, excuse me, and other high-level Republican officials to get into primary races that took place last night. And what we saw was, what I would argue, pretty astonishing. Out of the 7 candidates that President Donald Trump backed in the primary races for the Indiana State Senate, right? This is not the U.S. Senate. We're talking about their legislature, their General Assembly. The 7 candidates that Donald Trump backed, primarying 7 Republicans that voted to not approve these new maps, all won. All 7 candidates that were challenging incumbents that did not have the courage, did not have the will to vote in favor of these new congressional maps in the state of Indiana lost their primary elections last night. And so it prompts this discussion over what is the future of the GOP. And I'm not necessarily talking about Donald Trump. I'm not necessarily talking about MAGA as a whole. I'm talking about Republican voters. Because there has been an issue prior to Donald Trump in 2016, far too long, an issue where when Republicans have control, when Republicans have the majority, they are afraid to govern. And we see this in states all over the country. We're seeing it right now in Washington, D.C., with Senate Leader John Thune, who refuses to bring the SAVE Act, which has overwhelming support across Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated voters, refuses to bring it to the floor of the United States Senate for a vote. He refuses to do so because there is this weird thing with Republicans of days past, and some of them still exist, John Thune being one of them. When you are in a position of power, when you are in a position to govern, your voters want you to do so. Republican voters that gave you said job want you to lead and want you to govern. And that is what has plagued the Republican Party for so long leading up to 2016. Whenever they were in power, whenever they were in control, they refused to lead. Donald Trump flipped the script on that. And the question that I have for you, and the question I'm working through myself, is when Donald Trump is out of the equation in 2028, what is the mindset of Republicans moving forward? I'll have some more thoughts on this coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Plus, we'll get your comments as well as we continue our show here live on this Wednesday morning. But before that, I want to tell you about and thank the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support of the program, reminding you that when legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the Law Group. Since 2003, Melissa Gott and her team of experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense, the Law Group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, ladies and gentlemen, the Law Group, located in downtown Wilmington, they're not some big national law firm, and they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or online at lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group and their continued support here of the Nick Craig Show. Quick break. On the other side, we'll continue this discussion over the future of the GOP and give you some more details out of this Indiana primary taking place last night as the Nick Craig Show continues streaming live this morning, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. Don't forget to sign up for the Morning Line email. It is delivered free to your inbox every weekday morning at 6:30 a.m., giving you a quick sneak peek, a quick update on everything going on across the state of North Carolina, delivered free each and every weekday morning. ncmorningline.com is where you can sign up for free. We are continuing the very interesting discussion today over the future of the GOP, and this is prompted by some very interesting election results in the state of Indiana last night, as the Indiana legislature back in December of last year, the Senate, more specifically the Indiana Senate, refused to move forward with a redistricting plan. Republicans in Indiana in the Senate have a 40-10 advantage, Republican over Democrat in the Senate. However, enough 21 Republicans crossed over the aisle, voted with Democrats to reject the redistricting plan, which prompted President Donald Trump and many other grassroots organizations to get heavily involved in the Indiana primaries that took place last night or yesterday, I should say, throughout the day, and then results coming in last night on May the 5th. And the results, pretty astonishing. All 7 of the candidates that President Donald Trump backed, who were battling against incumbent senators in the state who refused to move forward with this redistricting plan, all of the incumbents lost. And all of the candidates that President Donald Trump supported and said, hey, we need people in here that are actually going to fight, won. And so, this sets the stage and sets the discussion for the Republican Party moving forward. And as I was just mentioning before the break and started this discussion, one of the biggest issues from my vantage point that has plagued the GOP now for quite some time is that they're just too afraid to govern. They're so afraid that the media and that Democrats are going to say mean, terrible, awful things about them that they refuse to lead. They refuse to govern when they have the ability. And the example I gave you is one that you are watching play out in real time right now. The SAVE Act in Washington, D.C. Something that we have looked at polling. I brought you some polling from CNN back just a couple of months ago that showed overwhelmingly across Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliateds, men, women, a variety of different racial groups, all in support of voter ID, all in support of individuals verifying who they are before they cast a ballot. That's what the SAVE Act does. And John Thune, who is currently leading the United States Senate, refuses to bring it forward. He refuses to do so. He's had months to do it. And folks, the clock is ticking. Republicans are not controlling the branches of government in all likelihood for the next 2 years. We have midterm elections coming up here in just a couple of months in which there is a strong likelihood that Democrats take control of the United States House. And there's also the possibility that they take control of the Senate, which will mean that any legislation they pass will be, of course, immediately vetoed by President Donald Trump, and any of Trump's agenda that he wants to move forward with will be dead in the water because Democrats are not going to work with the Trump administration. We will see 2 years of nothing going on in government. And I don't know what it is with these Republican lawmakers in certain states where they are terrified to lead, terrified to govern. It makes no sense. Voters from across the state of Indiana gave Republicans 40 votes in the Indiana Senate. 40 votes compared to Democrats who have just 10 seats in that chamber. 40-10. And Republicans don't think they have a mandate from their voters? The Republican leaders in the Indiana Senate don't believe that they have enough support, enough people behind them to move forward with GOP and Republican-led legislation? It's totally illogical. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And so as we broaden this out to this overall, this larger discussion over the future of the Republican Party, to me, the most interesting thing to watch is, do Republicans go back once Donald Trump is out of the Oval Office? And again, anybody that tells you right now they know exactly how this is going to play out is just lying to you, because they have no way to know. We don't know how involved at the time the former president of the United States will be. We don't know if he's still going to be going around the country and campaigning. We don't know if he's still going to be, using his voice, using his authority that he has within the Republican Party to kind of dictate and lead the party. We just don't know as of right now. And we do know for a fact that the more establishment wing of the party, the anti-Trump contingent, which I will note is much smaller than it has been in years past, we know that they're going to try and seize power back. We know this. There is still, for whatever reason, for 10 years now, there is still groups of individuals within the Republican Party, within the GOP, that refuse to get on board with Donald Trump, that refuse to move forward with a guy who is the now two-time elected president of the United States. It's totally illogical, and it's because they've lost power. They've lost influence, and I would suspect that they are setting the ground right now. They are laying the tracks right now to try and seize control of the party and seize control of the narrative as President Donald Trump terms out in 2028. And we know what they're going to usher in. They're going to usher in this loser mentality that we have seen from the GOP in the past. And I think the results in Indiana last night show overwhelmingly, with the president being successful in 7 of 7 GOP primary challenges, that the days of losing for the GOP need to be over. The days of clutching our pearls and pretending that somehow, because our ideas are better, that guarantees that we win every election and we're going to put up the most awful, terrible candidates possible to try and convince voters that our ideas are better. Those days are gone. That doesn't work anymore. The political landscape has changed dramatically in the last 20 or 25 years. You look at the John McCain's and the Mitt Romneys and the Paul Ryans of the Republican Party. Voters do not support that stuff anymore. And you want to talk about lame duck? You want to talk about being unwilling to govern? That's what we've seen from the GOP in the past. That is what caused the rise of the Tea Party movement in the early 2010s, giving Republicans majorities in the United States House and Senate, flipping states like North Carolina from more than 100 years of Democrat control. We saw that happen here in the Tar Heel State, and Republicans have maintained those majorities over the last 15 years or so since that took place, the 2010 midterm elections. And so we've seen the gradual change. The question is, at least from where I sit right now, the question is, what does it look like when Donald Trump is maybe no longer spearheading the conversation, when he's no longer leading the charge? Because we know what many of these folks in the GOP want, these more establishment types. They hate Donald Trump. They hate the fact that he is a bombastic, speaks from his mind kind of leader. They don't like that. Right? They're a fan of sitting in the cigar-filled rooms talking about the most recent 4,000-word article from the National Review and how that is going to champion Republican majorities and ideals across the nation. And we have very clear evidence that, frankly, that stuff just doesn't work. Republicans have seen the light under Donald Trump that not only can we win, but we can also govern. And so that is what is going to be so fascinating for me and I think many others to watch as we head through 2027, as we head through 2028. And I'm not trying to put the cart too far in front of the horse on this, but this Indiana result last night really is sticking with me as an idea that Republican voters want results. They want results, and more than anything else, they want to win. Can you fault them for that? I mean, who likes losing? I mean, I guess the establishment Republican Party was more than happy with losing. They had no problem putting up John McCain and Mitt Romney as their presidential nominees against Barack Obama. We saw how those two losers fared. They got clobbered, both of them. They were terrible candidates, awful candidates, and had no business being in those contests whatsoever. Don't take my word for it. Go look at the freaking election results. If you think those guys were good champions for the GOP, give me a freaking break. And then, of course, if you want to dive a little bit deeper into it and talk about somebody like John McCain, who ran an entire freaking presidential campaign on gutting Obamacare and not moving forward with it, had the ability to do so when he was in the United States Senate and caved and voted with the Democrats. That's the kind of Republican leadership that we have seen in years past. It's awful, it's terrible, and I think people are fed up and sick of it. So we're continuing this discussion over the future of the Republican Party, the future of the GOP after some very interesting primary results in Indiana last night, as 7 incumbents who were a part of a group of 21 in the Indiana Senate that voted against some redistricting maps back in December of 2025. Donald Trump's influence still weighs pretty heavy in these contests. And more than anything else, I would argue that voters in the state of Indiana, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be some expert on Indiana politics. That's not the intention of this conversation at all. But looking at what we saw, these voters, these Republican, these conservative voters were incredibly frustrated with their leadership. And can you blame them for being frustrated? Right? In that state, they elected Republicans overwhelmingly. 40 Republicans in the Indiana Senate elected them to govern and lead. And when they had the ability to govern and lead, what did they do? They caved and worked with the Democrats to block the ability for these redistricting maps to move forward. And the voters, I'm sure, and I think, I think I can say this accurately looking at the results last night. These voters said, why are we electing these people? Why are we putting people in positions of power when they're just going to vote with Democrats? I mean, you look at here in North Carolina, why is there so much frustration with somebody like Tom Tillis, who fortunately is not running for re-election? Why is there so much frustration? Because he got elected as a Republican in a state controlled by Republicans in the legislature, in which an overwhelming majority of Republican conservative voters showed up, in many cases, plugging their nose and voting for Tom Tillis, for him to go up to Washington, D.C. and side with Democrats, for him to go up to Washington, D.C. and be nothing more than a thorn in the side of a Republican president. Now, this is not to say that we should not remain strong in our ideals. This is not to say that we just swallow everything that we believe in and just puppet whatever the president of the United States is saying. No, it's quite the contrary. You have the ability to lead. John Thune right now is the greatest example of the holdovers of the establishment within the Republican Party. He has a majority in the United States Senate. His colleague on the House, Mike Johnson, has done an incredible job of moving forward the SAVE Act and giving the United States of America and its people very clear and concise legislation that would make it damn near impossible to cheat in elections across the United States. And what is John Thune doing? Nothing. Nothing. Refuses to govern. Refuses to lead. Why? You know exactly why. Because he's afraid that the Democrats might say something bad. He's afraid that the media might write a mean story about him. And the media, oh my God, the media is going to be mean to Republicans. Of course. That's all they do. Whether you are in a position of power or not, the media is going to hate you. Democrats are going to hate you. You've got to get over that. You're not in there to appease Democrats. You're not in there to appease the media. They're never going to like you. I talk to candidates all across the state of North Carolina, and one of the things that I stress to them over and over and over again, over a litany of different issues, whether it's at the state level, the local level, county commission, city council, there is one key thing that I always tell individuals that ask for my opinion and ask for my advice. Don't for 1 second believe that if you do something that the Democrats, quote unquote, want you to do, that you are going to be in their good graces. Don't for 1 second get into the mindset that if you come alongside the Democrats on this issue, that you are going to buy yourself some favors with the Democrats. Newsflash, you aren't. They hate you. They hate everything that you stand for. They are not going to support you. They are not going to be nice to you. They are not going to agree with you because you cross the aisle and work with them. Politics is a nasty, bloody business. It is as cutthroat as anything else. And so when you are in a position of power to lead, your voters, your constituents, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, want you to govern. Great comment coming in saying there are definitely Republicans who enjoy being in the minority so they can sit back and enjoy the perks of nothing. Oh, absolutely. Because it's a whole hell of a lot easier to be in the minority and complain than it is to be in the majority and actually govern. And the Republican Party, I would argue, in years past, prior to the rise of Donald Trump, got pretty happy doing that. Where they could not win elections, they could put up terrible candidates, they could sit in the minority and go, well, Barack Obama's just doing these terrible things, and we'd love to fight back against this, but we just don't have the ability to do so. We just don't have the majority to do so. And so, we're going to hold our news conferences and we're going to hold these press conferences and speak all these great words and speak all these words into power. Then, of course, they have the ability to govern. And what do? They capitulate because it's a lot easier to be in the minority and complain than it is to be in the majority and govern. And John Thune, unfortunately, is just a great example of this. And it's so frustrating for Republican voters. So many of these voters that are relatively new to the party that Trump brought in. Another great comment coming in. John comments and says, Trump brought so many new people to the GOP. How they adjust to not having Trump or MAGA on the scene will be most interesting. Those people that Donald Trump brought to the GOP starting in 2015 and, of course, through the 2016 election, those individuals, they want to win. Speaking for myself, I want to win. I don't enjoy losing. Whether it's in politics, sports, board games, video games, it doesn't matter. I don't enjoy losing. You watch your favorite sports team, you like sitting there and watching them lose? You enjoy playing a game with some friends and losing? No, of course not. You'd be a sociopath. Everybody loves winning. Everybody loves getting their way when you're talking about governance or your sports team or whatever it might be. Of course, everybody loves winning. Unless, of course, you find yourself in the more establishment wing of the GOP that just seems totally happy with losing and losing and losing and losing. These new voters that Trump brought to the GOP, they ain't interested in that. They want to govern. They want to lead. They want strong leaders that are going to push forward an agenda and are not going to capitulate to the Democrats and to the mainstream media. Again, newsflash, the media is always going to hate us. Newsflash, Democrats are always going to hate us. Stop thinking that you're going to do the right thing and get in their good graces. It's never happened in the past, and it will never happen in the future. It just won't. It sounds good on paper. The concept it sounds good in your head. It might make sense as you're storyboarding it and talking about it out loud. The reality is one that is very different. Democrats will not support you. Democrats will not vote for you. Democrats will not come to your support when you need them just because you made the quote unquote right vote one time and gave them what they wanted. No. They will still not support you, and they will continue to pressure you into giving them what they want. Plain and simple. So some interesting results in Indiana last night. I'll have all the research material, all the links and all of that over on our Patreon, patreon.com/Nick Craig. And again, if you are interested in a couple hours of some light TV watching, I will admit it'll probably drive you a little bit nuts. You should check out the CNN gubernatorial debate in the state of California that happened last night. A truly eye-opening couple hours of TV viewing from my vantage point. We'll keep you up to date on all of it right here on the Nick Craig Show. Well, that's going to do it for a Wednesday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. You can visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and is available 24/7 in your favorite podcast apps. It's also heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy the day. We'll do it again tomorrow morning right here on the Nick Craig Show.